Today is a special Self-Care Sunday. I have a guest today, Dr. Diana Hill, who has put out a wonderful new book called the Self-Compassion Daily Journal. And I'm really excited to have Dr. Diana on this live today and talk about the book and talk about self-compassion and always weaving it in back into self-care. So thank you for joining me today on Self-Care Sunday. If this is your first time here, my name is Giulia Preziuso. I'm the author of It's Your Mother's Fault, Now What? And a complex post-traumatic stress therapist specialist in that area. Good morning. Nice to see you, dear friend.
Good to see you too. How are you?
I am great. I'm on time, which
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm on time too. It's Sunday morning. Being on time is a challenge in my household. Yeah.
I know, and it's 9 a.m. for you.
Yeah.
It's noon for me, so I've been up and around. However, I have all of these things that I have to do before I can go live, like vacuum and change the bed sheets. Like there's all of these chores that have to happen.
I don't do all those chores before I go live on a Sunday morning. That is not happening. I actually just gave a lot of commands to my household of what chores need to be done upon my return.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. Giving commands is a powerful place to be. So I'm hoping that everybody does what they need to do for you today. So please do me a favor, even though your face is very familiar on my Self-Care Sunday, please let everybody know who you are and let's talk about your new book.
Yeah. I'm Dr. Diana Hill, and I'm a clinical psychologist here in Santa Barbara. I have a couple of books, but the new one that I just wrote that we've been talking a lot about just with each other, Giulia, is the Self-Compassion Daily Journal. And it's out on March 1st. But let me tell you, this is not an easy topic for me personally. And I know that we do a lot of work in terms of relationships. You do that a lot with your followers and your clients. And one area that is particularly difficult is having self-compassion when you are in a relationship or in relationships in general. How do you take care of yourself, your feelings, your struggles, while also loving someone else? So I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about that today. And yeah, just glad to be here. You've been such a important part of my life in seeing compassion in action. You're the person I call when I need to boost my self-compassion. So it's just fun to be here with you.
Talk about the challenges in the self-compassion piece. Why is that not a standard for us? Why is that not our go-to? Talk about, your individual challenges. Why do we need somebody to call to get a self-compassion reminder or boost?
Well, I actually have a chapter on that in here where you explore the biopsychosocial reasons, because it's not that there's something wrong with you. There's biological reasons, there's brain reasons why we have a hard time being kind to ourselves, because we evolved this little inner critic for a reason, to try and keep us in line, try and help us be part of the group, right? And there's also contextual and social reasons why we have a hard time being self-compassionate. Many of us had self-critical parents, caregivers early on, school systems that get out the red pen, that, in terms of pointing out everything that's wrong with us and thinking that's going to motivate us to do better. And then there's also larger cultural reasons, things like systemic oppression, things like a culture that makes and a society that makes a lot of money off of you feeling bad about yourself, then you'll buy something, right? So it's complex, biopsychosocial, and we're all swimming in it, right? We just think that we need to be hard on ourselves to motivate ourselves. And actually the research is hands down demonstrating the opposite, that when you can actually talk to yourself in a kind way, be encouraging, being motivating, be like the best coach that you've ever had, or maybe haven't had, but you want to be, then you actually will perform better and you'll do better in your relationships. I notice for myself, when I'm critical towards myself, it spills over into all the people around me. So learning how to be more self-compassionate actually has an impact on others as well. It's not selfish.
No. Not at all, because you're right. If there's a strong inner critic, there is a stronger outer critic, because the outer critic is also there to help protect the inner critic and the biases that the inner critic believes. So we're always looking for the outer critic's help to substantiate the inner critic. And I think my people here, we talk a lot about the internal family system.
Mm-hmm.
There is an internal family. There's not just one critic, there's several critics that come along throughout life, and your job here, and at least in my opinion, is to identify the critics and then love them until they love you, because they all have a purpose for why they're here. And if we can transform them through this work, then your day to day is going to be a lot smoother and a lot easier to
Yeah.
manage.
They're misdirected. You know, sometimes it's having compassion for the critic that it showed up to try and protect you for some reason, right? And it maybe it just got misdirected in how it's doing that. You and I, were you there in Costa Rica when we did the Feeding Your Inner Demons Tibetan practice? Were you there for that
I
one?
don't believe so, but
Yeah,
describe it to me.
there's a Tibetan practice that actually has been passed on by Lama Tsultrim, who's a lama, that is about identifying your critic. You like put your critic in front of you and you ask it, what is it? What do you want? What are you here for? What do you need? And then you actually feed it. And in this practice, you feed it in the form of like food, like hot fudge or cookies or what. This is very much for you, Giulia, where you actually feed it and give it what it needs. And once it's satisfied, it stops criticizing you, right? So there's a way to transform our critics into our allies. And it does require making contact with that which we often fear the most, which is, you know, parts of ourselves that we've shunned, we've put in the corner. And it doesn't help us to ostracize parts of ourselves either. Even the critic, we can welcome that in and transform it, ask it what it really needs.
I agree with you. I believe that the critic needs to be integrated into the family, and then the critic won't feel the need to be so quick to put you down or to discourage you or to talk you out of something. When you understand that the role of the critic is really some form of protection. Oh, you can't do that. The critic trying to prevent you from embarrassing yourself. The critic trying to prevent you from humiliating yourself. The critic trying to prevent you from doing hard things. So when you can talk back to the critic and let it know that we can do hard things, we're capable of this work, we're able to transform this criticism into compassion, because with compassion, you have the cure to all of it. You have the cure to all of it. Nothing stands up against compassion from what I've seen.
Yeah, it's a resource that keeps on growing, that feeds back to you. And even just by what you're doing there, where you start to identify and label, that's my critic voice, you're already on your way, because you're not identifying with that's me, or you're not believing that thought to be true or just following it. I just have critical thoughts all the time. They pop into my head as I'm going about my life, about, you know, my looks, about my job, about my parents, whatever. It can just, it's not even my voice. It's the voice that I took on from somebody else. And it doesn't mean that you have to listen to it. So that's the first step of self-compassion, is just making contact with that part of you that's hurting, or making contact with the part of you that needs some help, and then offering some help to the part of you that needs help, not necessarily following the critic voice wherever it takes you. Being able to observe that is, it's a challenging skill, but I think it's something you do, Giulia. I mean, I know when we talk with each other, we often are saying things like, oh, my critic is saying this, or my self-sabotager is saying that. When you're starting to talk in that way, you're already doing the work, because you're not identifying it as being your whole version of who you are.
It's so hard to stop the noise. It's so hard to even see that this is what's taking place. It's so hard to stop all of the voices and all of the thoughts, and really spending time noticing. I think that's the part of the hardest part of the work, is just creating the ability to observe and to notice. So when I was looking at the book, I really appreciate chapter 4 on opening up and being with. That leads to awareness, the acceptance of these uncomfortable emotions that we try so hard to run from and to avoid and to distract from, and having competing thoughts. What would happen if we just started to open up and be with them in a new way? So if you can talk a little bit about that chapter and your hopes for the
Yeah.
reader.
Well, it's counterintuitive, right? You feel something uncomfortable and you want to tense up, you want to push it away. The most common requests I get as a therapist are help me stop thinking about this, help me stop feeling that, and help me stop remembering this. And when clients tell me that, I say, oh, I'm not that kind of therapist. I don't know if I can help you stop feeling, thinking, or remembering. And I'm not really sure if you would want to do that, because what you're feeling is important. There's messages in our feelings. And when you can uncover and you can go underneath what you're feeling, how it's linked to what you care about, then you can actually act on what you care about. Sometimes we need to remember things so that we can change our behavior. We can change the past in the present moment. That's where we have the power,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes we do need to remember. It's not becoming so engrossed in those horrible memories that you're always living in them, but it's actually using them as pointers to how do I want to act in my life right now. And sometimes we need to work with our thoughts. We need to sometimes just ignore our thoughts, but sometimes we need to work with them. We need to develop more compassionate thoughts. So the opening up and being with is the first part of compassion. Compassion has two wings. It has the first wing of awareness. The can I be with what's here? And what that looks like, I've shared a little bit about in my life of what my husband's going through, all these health problems. If I stop thinking about, stop feeling, or stop remembering that, then I'm no longer able to be with my partner who I love. So I need to sit with him in his pain and in my own pain and open up and allow and be with what's real and here in our life. That's the first part, the first wing of compassion. And then the second wing of compassion is doing something about it, being helpful to yourself, helping yourself out, staying on your own side, being a loving, caring, supportive human to yourself, using a tone of voice that's loving and caring, so that then you can offer that compassion to others. So it really is a foundational skill, and it's not easy, and it's not our go-to. We just want to run. We want to numb out. We want to not feel it.
Yeah, you're right. And I love what you're saying, when clients are like, help me stop. And really what we need them to do is help them see, help me see what's causing me so much distress, and not help me stop. Because so many, I believe, and maybe you can help me with this on the research end, right? There's an addictive quality to our thought patterns. Like there are thoughts in that brain that have been reinforced for 4 decades, and there's addiction qualities, in my opinion, too, that helps to support why it's so hard to stop, because you're like a little addict. You need that hit of self-criticism and that hit of self-doubt, and instead of looking for where's the hit of self-compassion today, has there been a hit of self-help, actually helping yourself? Can you identify the self that you're looking to help? I mean, we talk so much about self-help, and I find that there's many people out there that don't have a concrete sense of self to begin with. They don't know who they're helping.
Yeah. Well, and the self is such a big question, right? We've talked a bit about that, because there's their inner self, which is what we're working on with self-compassion, your inner world. How do you help out your inner world if you don't even know what's in there? And in order to know what's in there, you have to spend some time with it. You have to be able to be willing to go into those places that are maybe scary to be with or sit with. I've had clients sit on my couch and they have a hard time closing their eyes for a minute with me to do it, just a little mini practice. And we'll start with our eyes open, because it's too hard to sit here with my eyes closed, especially if you've experienced trauma. Then it is hard to go to your inner world. And when that's the case, I don't want to say this is an easy thing. When that's the case, you got to go extra gentle, extra slow to start to identify that self that you want to help. But it doesn't end there, because when you start treating yourself differently, it transforms into your outer world, the self that is connected to the people that you love or people that you even struggle with. You can show up in a different way with your mother-in-law, with your brother, with the person that's making your coffee at Starbucks, when you have a kinder relationship with yourself. It becomes more automatic. And when you talk about the addictive quality of thoughts, I would say thoughts are habits. They are in the same way that a habit is something you just do. You don't think about it, it just happens. You wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth. It's a habit, right? The way you hold your body and your posture, it's a habit. And how do you change a habit? You bring awareness to what you are doing. and you actively, consciously, with commitment, choose to do it differently. And when you do that and you repeat it over and over and over again, it becomes a new habit. People with beautiful posture, they don't think about it. They just have beautiful posture. I'm working on my posture. Can you tell? It's an act of self-compassion. So these are things that when you practice, and it's in the beginning, it's a little cumbersome. But when you practice, it becomes a habit, and it becomes a habit that benefits you. But I really do think in the world that we are in, we need everyone, every single person out there to be working on compassion and developing our wisest self, because we need every wisest version available to help us with the polycrises that we're facing. So make it a habit to practice self-compassion so that then you can be that habit out in the world that starts the ripple effect with others and maybe help someone else develop their compassionate version of themselves.
And I heard you say, maybe it's a little cumbersome, but I'd like to say, like, isn't feeling like shit cumbersome too? Isn't cumbersome to feel awful every day, to be walking around not liking yourself, not liking anything you see, not feeling safe, not feeling comfortable, not being able to feel, being paralyzed, being in a trauma response, many of you still frozen in time because you're just so overwhelmed by everything that's going on in here that you really don't know that you have so much power to slow things down and, like Dr. Diana said, really help to navigate and influence your relationships. And I can really speak to this firsthand because the self-compassion and loving kindness, all of this higher level awareness really came to the forefront of my mind not too long ago. It's really 2021 in Costa Rica that this landed on my radar in a really profound way. And it wasn't because my therapist didn't make attempts. I mean, she made attempts back in 2016, and I was like, take that and shove it. There's no way I'm doing that. Forget about it. I don't like any of those people, including myself. And that was really the problem, is that I was having a hard time with myself. And then through this intentional work of building that self-compassion, of making eye contact with yourself, through smiling at yourself, you are building a new habit. And that's the energy that you pour out. So when you go around people that typically make it difficult for yourself, there's less triggers. So let me talk about my mother specifically, because I identified her voice as one of the early critics that I had internalized, and a lot of her insecurities and a lot of her fears became my own. And it took some time to really detach myself from her and be able to see it in a way where I'm like, oh, look at you, Carmela. Look at you in my mind that way, even if you're away from me, because as many of you know, I was estranged from my mother for 10 years. And even though she was away from me, it took me a good 5 of those 10 years to work on the voice that had colonized my mind. Yeah. And that's what that critic is. It's colonizing your mind. And even if the critic is present or not, some of you, this is your ex, some of you, this is your mother, some of you, this is a coach or a teacher, you have to be able to tease apart that those thoughts are not your thoughts, and there's something that you have internalized because you heard them on repeat or you watched it on repeat and it became yours. And so once I was able to identify it and say, hey, Giulia, I speak to myself in third person when I was doing this work early on because I needed to get my own attention. And I would incorporate some moves like, hey, Giulia, not helpful. Hey, Giulia, try that again. So whenever I would catch myself in the act of criticism or in the act of outer critic or inner critic, it became a very conscious act to say, hey, that's not helpful. Can you try that again? And so through trying that again and through changing my tone and through changing what I'm saying and through all of the conscious awareness that I built, my eyes don't look at me that way. My eyes are not going to look at you that way. I'm not looking at you for the first thing about you that's not quite right. I'm looking for everything about you that's working, everything about you that I love, everything about you that makes me happy to see you. And that's what I started to extend, especially to my mom, which was really hard to do because she wasn't very kind to me. And I know I've expressed this where I felt like her hatred of me was greater, or her hatred of my father rather was greater than her love of me. And I always felt that from her until I stopped feeling that from myself. And when I stopped feeling that hatred from me to me, I don't feel it from anybody. Is that landing for you?
Oh my gosh, Julia. Yes. Well, there's so many ways it lands. One is that I feel that way around you because I feel as your friend that when we're talking, you only see the good and you point that out and you help me see the good in me. And it's because you're doing that with yourself. And as you were talking, I was also thinking about our habits around how we see ourselves for years. I'd go in the mirror in the morning,
Mhm.
brush my teeth, and I would hyper focus on the parts of my body I hate. And I would just rehearse it. Oh, I hate that part of my body. Oh, look at that part. It was almost as if I was taking my own personal ugly magnifying glass up to the parts of me that I didn't like. And so, guess what? Those parts became this relationship where that's all that I would see. I wouldn't see a holistic version of me. And maybe we do that with parts of our body, or we do that with parts of our personality, or we do that with parts of our skill set where we just start to rehearse the negative. And that's what becomes the habit. And so as you're doing this and you're doing this, you are waking yourself up. Like, how do we wake
That's right.
ourselves up to the patterning that we're in that is making us miserable? Instead of just, if you think about, we're stuck in a rut. What's the nature of a rut? It has these sort of high walls and we just keep on going down the rut because in some ways it's easier to even if it's making you miserable, sometimes it's easier to stay in the rut. And to get out of it, to make a new path, requires some awareness and courage and also belief and seeing that other people are doing things differently and that's possible. So that's another part of compassion, is having compassionate people in your life, choosing people that are practicing this and saddling up to them, having them be your friends so that you are co-creating this new way of working with each other, relating, this more secure way of relating to each other and to yourself.
Make relationships mean something. It becomes a whole new standard of relationship. And we can talk about, changes in relationship as you are while you're on a therapeutic journey. You're going to recycle some relationships. You're going to rid yourself of some relationships. And hopefully in the process of relating to yourself more compassionately, you're building some standards in relationship regarding the type of things that you want to see. And again, I don't expect this of you. However, I hold myself to these standards. And so people that want to be welcomed into my life are going to have to meet the standards, or they're going to meet my boundaries. And that's something that happens when you meet yourself on this journey towards self-compassion, towards recovery work, whatever you want to call it. And the body image stuff, right? I think so many of us can relate, anybody out there who has a set of eyes, who can see themselves, you are hyper focusing on all the things that are going wrong with you. And if you could make that time in the mirror more intentional, that's a place where I started. In my bathroom on the mirror are 3 post-it notes that say, smile, breathe, you're not that important. And it makes me laugh every time I see it, because it's something that my therapist said to me a very long time ago. As many of you know, I lost over 125 pounds. It's been 25 years of keeping off 125-pound weight loss. So I struggled for many years with the mirror, because despite losing 125 pounds, I still saw 265. I still had the shadow, and it took so much time to rid myself of the shadow that still tries to peek its head out from time to time, particularly if I go to like a yoga studio with mirrors. There's always something and I'm like, oh, there you are. No, we're not doing this today. And I talk to it right there on the spot. There's something that's going on inside of me. So I really appreciate on week 6 when you talk about compassion for your body. And for the listeners out there, this is why the book is so incredibly important, because it really pieces apart all of the things. And you, on page 113, have a prompt where the reader can write to their body, dear body, I'm sorry I neglected you or harmed you by. And I feel like, Diana, you really, really nailed it with this section and including this part of it, because instead of looking at your body with the criticism, instead of looking at yourself that way, you're going to start looking at yourself with eyes of remorse and I'm sorry, and showing yourself that compassion. So talk to me about the compassion for the body.
Well, I think I nailed that section because I know it so personally,
Yeah.
so personally well. You know, Julia, you lost 120, 120 pounds.
5-ish,
Yeah, 120
30.
pounds. I had to gain, what is it? Um, 30, 50, 60, 60 pounds. Um,
Oh my
because I was so sick
God.
from starving myself, right? So it doesn't matter which end of the spectrum you're in. When you are making repairs with your body, it's listening to the impact of what it's like to be your body. Like, have you ever asked your thighs, what is it like? I just did an exercise with a client in session this week where I had her lie down on my ground. I put a big, beautiful weighted blanket over her, and I had her lie down in this beautiful soft spot, and we had a conversation with her thighs, and we started with having her thighs tell her what it's been like to be her thighs. And I had her close her eyes but speak it out loud from the position of her thighs. This is what it's been like to be your
Mm.
thighs. This is how hard it's been. And then what do your thighs want you to know? Oh my gosh, I want you to know how much I've done for you and how strong I am. And, you know, and then I had her talk back to her thighs. What do you want to tell your thighs? What do you want to apologize for? What do you regret? What do you want to commit to moving forward in relationship to these thighs? And we had this beautiful interaction between her and her thighs. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had that conversation with your eyes? Or maybe with your belly, or maybe with your pounding heart, or for those of us that have smoked, or those of us had addictions, have you ever had a conversation with your esophagus? And when you start to relate to your body in that way, it's a scary place to go. She was like, it is scary to talk to my thighs. I don't want to hear from them because I'm scared what they're going to say. But actually, what you find is that your body is quite forgiving and has
Mhm.
such a capacity to heal and really, really, really wants to be there for you. And your body is like this, just waiting for you to wake up to seeing its magic, its beauty, its miracle nature. And when you do that, you change your relationship with it. So that's been my lifelong journey. I mean, 14 years old, I was 72 pounds in a hospital, and they were trying to keep me alive. And since then, it's been, you know, every eating disorder in the book. But now it's, wow, I'm so grateful to have this body. I've trashed it in so many ways for so many years, and it's still working for me for the most part. It's doing the best it can. So when we start to have compassion for our body, we change our relationship with our body, and we also can acknowledge that our body is changing. It's not to, I get kind of irritated by health stuff. Like I value health. Well, does that mean you don't value your body when you're in a space where you're not in health? Like, what does it mean to value health? It's more about, I value taking care of this body as it changes over time. And sometimes it's going to be in you know, healthier spaces. Sometimes it's not going to be in as healthy spaces. And I can take care of it no matter what, no matter where it is right now.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. I remember writing a journal entry to myself probably 15 years ago now, where I was like, head, I'm so sorry that you hurt all the time. Like my head was always throbbing, like shoulders. You've worked so hard to carry so much weight, and I'm so sorry I keep piling it on you. So it again, it's that recognition and that awareness. So when that's your inner world, for everyone listening, when your inner world is filled with, hey, glutes, thanks for getting me up the stairs today.
Yeah.
Thanks for helping quads and hamstrings and calves and ankles make it up the stairs today. I owe you one. Thanks for all the things I can still do, because I feel you on that as I am, navigating the fourth decade, and I haven't been able to. I've had radiculopathy in my right leg for several years now, and it's not letting up. So I used to attach myself to how many days I couldn't feel. Instead, now I'm attached to everything I can still do despite radiculopathy, the fact that I can still ride my bike even if I'm not as fast as I used to be, the fact that I can still walk, that I can still get up the stairs, all the things I can do. Again, gratitude for this house that has been holding on to me for so long and is going to carry me through until I get my new property. So I love that, being intentional with yourself and really noticing what you're doing to your body. And I feel that so many can use that help because they're so detached from what's going on in that inner world for whatever reason. So I love that. I love you. And I love this relationship that we've been building because, like I said, it hasn't been that long that I've been really focused on this part of the work. And what I have found is like this is the last puzzle piece, because when you're well, your world you become interconnected. You're not looking for how you don't fit in anymore. You're looking for the ways that you can connect. And going back to the relationship piece, everyone, when you start this journey and when you as you're on it, things are going to change relationship wise.
Yes.
Because again, when you raise the standard on how you talk to yourself and how you treat yourself, there's no room for people around you that don't meet the standard, because you're not tolerating it from you. You're definitely not tolerating it from anyone else. And so that's really you're the missing part. When you identify the self, when you begin caring for the self, you will become empty of yourself and then seeking others to fill and to navigate and to accompany you. And you're going to be finding these interconnected receptors. I like them, that they're seeking out others versus retreating into isolation where your trauma wants to keep you hostage.
You will find that others will seek out you. That's the other thing. You become an attractor. So you become someone that people want to be around because they feel your groundedness, or they feel your sense of, wow, she really cares for herself, or he really cares for himself, or they really care for themselves. I want to be around that. And it's not that you have to be like always this even keeled. I mean, I call you at times where I'm losing my mind, but we have a common humanity, a general understanding of that we believe in a bigger truth. But yeah, you can lose it sometimes, and you can lose track of, you can get caught in your threat system. To be securely relating, to have self-compassion doesn't mean that you no longer have a threat system that gets activated. Everyone does, and it will happen. But what it means is you now have a pathway when that threat system gets activated. You know, sometimes it's, I need to call somebody else because I can't do it on my own right now, or I need to go into nature. For me, it's, I live in this beautiful oak grove, and when I start to feel dysregulated after a client or at the end of the day, just going out and being in the trees and touching a tree and looking out at the horizon, that space between the sky and the underworld, and seeing the possibility. When we open our eyes in that way, when we have a panoramic view, we activate the parts of our brain that are more allocentric, that see more than just us up close. It's all about me. So you will start to attract people that want that type of, to resonate at that level too, when you practice self-compassion. And then you also won't have that expectation. That, I think this is the difference between self-compassion and self-esteem, which is when you are trying to boost yourself up to be better than everyone, then you have the expectation that you always need to be above average and better than everyone. You get a little narcissistic. Self-esteem is statistically related to narcissism. Whereas self-compassion is an understanding, like you said, those interconnected, receptors, that we are all in it together. We all struggle. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and we all have inherent goodness. We have a true nature that is good within, and you'll attract people that have that true nature, see that true nature in you. So yes, I think it improves your relationships, and it gives you a path, which is, I think a lot of us are wondering, what do we do with it? How are we going to handle all this? How are we going to handle it? And compassion is really the one answer that I think is what will be possible for us to be able to handle what we're handling.
And you've already been through the hardest days. I mean, that's the other part of it, is remembering how much you've been through, and how many days have you already gotten through. That now what Diana and I are asking you to do is go back and hold your own hand while you process through some of the most challenging moments of your life, when Diana's recalling her 14-year-old self who needed to be put in a hospital to put weight on her because she was so sick. I mean, if you can just create that little bit of a separation between you and yourself, so you could see yourself, is sort of the way the Buddha describes this work, is holding yourself like a mother would her crying baby. It's like, oh my goodness, look at me. Look at 14-year-old me, who was so frail and so weak, and really just trying to be seen, even though she was almost invisible.
And when I can do that for me, then I can do it for my 14-year-old son. So I have a
Oh,
14-year-old in my house now who acts like a 14-year-old, you know? And maybe you don't have a 14-year-old in your house, but you have a parent that acts like a 14-year-old, or a sister that acts like a 14-year-old. And when you start to see, oh, this is somebody that's hurting, and the best way to respond when somebody is hurting is with care, then
mm,
you can see whatever nasty behavior that's showing up, the 14-year-old on the freeway, the 14-year-old in your house, or the 14-year-old in your workspace, and you have a centered equanimity, a groundedness to you that can just be loving. And what I find is that when you are consistently loving, sometimes it seeps in, sometimes people will change their behavior, but it changes, no matter what, it changes your experience in the presence of another person, because you are not adding to it. You're not adding to it. And if we can stop adding to nastiness, whether it's towards ourselves or towards others, then we're already going in a better direction.
yeah.
So I felt that with you when we were, I called you in Costa Rica because I was freaking out about an interaction that I was going to have. And I was like, Julie, I need your help. And you gave me the instructions. You're like, honey, go down to the beach, go find a rock or get a shell, hold it in your hand and squeeze it. And when you're in this interaction with this person, squeeze it and remember, it'll help you get back into your body, and it'll help you remember, who you are. And it was so helpful to me. Just these little tiny practices. That's a practice of self-compassion. I'm gonna find my little thing, my little charm, my little rock that reminds me of the bigger truth, which love is what is the most powerful antidote to pretty much anything that we're facing. Love for ourselves and love for each other.
Staying present is the most loving thing that you can do for yourself. You should become repulsed by the addiction to your thoughts and these behaviors that follow, these not so helpful habits. Become repulsed by that. And it's also very predictable once you begin to see that. I know when my critic would say something, I'm like, oh, there you are. Back again. I see, and I have this dialogue with my critic, like, that's cute, so predictable, so on brand for you, and not today.
Mm-hmm.
I,
What does your critic say, Julia? What does your critic say? Yeah.
well, I suppose, gosh, well, I can talk about my critic in respects to my professional
Yeah.
life. When I was writing my book, I know my critic was heavy when I was writing the book. I'm like, I don't write books. I'm not a writer. I'm a therapist. I don't do that. And I remember, like, I've had 7 major career changes before I became a therapist. Like, I'd never picked this job. Yeah, I was drafted
Mm-hmm.
for it. I feel like life led me here, and then it all kind of makes sense, right? So I remember my critics saying, you're not a writer. What are you doing? What do you know? And then I remember that what I know for sure is that I don't know shit. And everything I know, I learned it from somebody else. But for whatever reason, you all like the way that I spit it to you, because we're not we're not doing anything brand new. Okay?
Yeah.
So when I started to, like, Julia, you're not that important. Going back to that story, that you're not that important story, and the weight loss. That was my critic. My critic said, you can't wear a bathing suit. You can't wear this. You can't wear that because of morbid childhood obesity. You can't do that because of your skin. You can't do that because of the way this looks, because of the way that looks. And my therapist said to me, Giulia, you can run out naked and nobody cares because you're not that important. They're all worried about themselves. And she's so right. Because when you notice people, they're really struggling with themselves. And that's really what's helped me to soften too, is like when I began to soften, and I know when I say that word, using soften with myself, I'm still working on the softness part. But when I did begin to soften with the way that I saw myself, I did notice how other people were struggling. I do notice every little nuance, and maybe that's my trauma, but I do notice the all of the micro expressions, and that helps me to just be kind.
Yeah.
Because I already know. And I used to wait for somebody to be unkind to me because I was morbidly obese, or I was always faced with some sort of bullying or comments being made, and I was quick to have a response. So if you thought you were going to say something to me that I hadn't already heard, you had another thing coming, because I was ready for you and I was ready to assassinate you. And now I'm not assassinating me anymore. So everybody is safe. All I want to do is love you. So when I look at you, I just want to love you because I just want to love me. And I know how hard that is.
Well, the you're not so important part is part of the common humanity aspect of self-compassion. Again, not putting yourself up here, but also not putting yourself down there, but that everyone struggles. I mean, if you walk through the grocery store and you just push your cart and you start to look at people differently, and you look at every single person in that grocery store. This is actually a practice I have you do in the book, where it's the just like me practice. And you start to look at each person and you say, just like me, this person has things that they really want in their life, people that they love, things they care about. Just like me, this person right now, right here, has something that they're struggling with, something that keeps them up at night, something that they're afraid of, something that they're critical about themselves about. And you start to see that in every human. You and I see it because we're therapists. We're therapists. And when you become a therapist, you just hear that common humanity of every single person, even the people that you're like, what, this person? No way. They've got it all together. They struggle too. And when you can't help but feel compassion for others when you see that this is the nature of being human. We all struggle. We all have minds that are critical of us. We all have, points in our life that are challenging and other points that are wonderful. Some people have bigger obstacles, bigger barriers, bigger struggles than others. So we are not all the same in that realm. We are not all the same. I have a lot of privileges that just by the nature of the body that I was born into, the family that I was born into, and everyone struggles. So it's both, right? So when you start to see the just like me nature of people, then you just want to love people. You want to love people. Everyone was a baby at some point. That's another practice of seeing, can you imagine them as a little kid? That every single person there was a baby. There you are. Oh,
I
she's so
have
cute.
her. I've always got this picture, on my desk, because I'm looking for the children in my clients too. And when they see their inner child, it's such a celebration. My inner child's happy. She has a new friend. The client sees themselves in a new way, and they start to talk to themselves differently. They start to slow down. They start to be more mindful because we've identified a part, and the baby seems to be the easiest one. I don't know that I can give you 22-year-old Giulia the way that I can give you 6-year-old Giulia. We have different parts of ourselves that carry more shame, that have more life experiences, that get in the way of the self-forgiveness. And I really want to spend a little time on the regrets and the forgiveness piece that you have in week 7, because I feel like that's a big important part of this too, is being able to see previous parts of yourself and having some remorse for the decisions that you made when you didn't have all the information, the decisions that you made when you didn't do your best work. So that just like me, I do that as it pertains to Giulia number 17, the one who got into a lot of trouble. And like, just like me, you have things that you don't want to talk about. Just like me, you might have been in the back of a cop car. Just like me, You might have found yourself in a place where you didn't know how you were going to get your next meal. Just like me, you might have said some stuff that you regret. Just like me, you might have been shady. And I think that that's part of the process too, is like getting closer to the shady part of me, who is also the critic.
Yeah. So how this book developed, or the reason why I wrote this book, was that I was in a workshop with the publisher, New Harbinger. I didn't know, I was sitting next to him, and we were in a self-critic workshop, and we were given this assignment to tell each other about a time in our life that we regret and that we have a lot of shame around. And so I told him the story of being 17 years old and being in a park bathroom, which is where I used to go to purge when I was bulimic. So yeah, it starts out as anorexia, but then it turns into going to the grocery store, buying, loaves of bread and boxes of cookies and bought whole boxes of ice cream bars and eating all of it in my car, and then driving to a park bathroom to go throw it up. It's not so pretty, right? And then on the outside, it's all looking good. So I'm in the park bathroom, I'm throwing it up, and a mom and their kid comes in, and this little girl, if you've ever been in a bathroom with kids, I remember my kids were little, they do this thing, which is they go down and they put their head under underneath the stall to see what's on the other side. It's just whatever, you're 3, you're curious, right? So this little girl does that, and the mom says, "That's disgusting, honey. That's disgusting." And in that moment, all I could feel was, how disgusting am I as a human being to be doing this? And I told that to this publisher. We're in this workshop, this like therapy workshop. I'm telling him this most disgusting memory of myself. And he looks at me and he said, "You need to write a book on self-compassion." And that's how it started, right? So regrets. If we don't make contact with that part of ourselves that we feel so disgusted by, and we start to heal that relationship with ourselves, and we can see it differently than how we felt in that moment, then we're going to be stuck in the regret forever. But what we can do is we can transform it.
Yeah.
And when you make contact with it, you transform it. And in the present moment, you do something different. And so for me, like it's healing that disgust, like that how I feel about myself, was in part writing this book for all the people that feel that about themselves, that maybe you could see yourself with loving eyes, or see yourself a little bit differently, see yourself with curiosity. That little girl didn't think I was disgusting. She was just curious. And I now don't think I was disgusting. I was struggling. I had an addiction. I had an addiction.
You were sick.
I was
so
sick. Yeah.
so sick.
And then I went on to, lead research studies on bulimia, started a treatment program for bulimia, dedicate my life for many years to helping individuals who are struggling with the same thing that I struggled with. So there's a way in which you can transform it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, because your history is part of your destiny. And until you can look at every single thing that you've gone through with gratitude and appreciation, because all of it led to this moment, there is nothing that we need to forget about. There is nothing that we need to. I'm glad to see the hearts and the hundreds, guys, because I hope you're hearing this. There's nothing that you need to forget about. There's nothing you need to pretend didn't ever happen to you, because we're using self-disclosure, not because we want you to know all about us, but because we want you to understand we got drafted into this work. We didn't pick this. We were struggling too. We still do struggle, and we don't have all of the answers, but what we do have is the courage to say, I don't have all the answers and I'm struggling. And when you have courage too, you're going to understand that your history is part of your destiny. You better turn around and understand where you came from if you want to know where you're headed, because that's what happens. You get seated next to the guy who's going to help you write the book, like, and you're telling him the story of when you felt the most disgusting. And I know you'll never forget that. That's like core zapped in your mind. You'll never forget that woman's voice and what she said to her daughter and how it made you feel about yourself. And there you are sitting next to the publisher in a workshop sharing that, and his response is, you should write a book on this.
Yeah. There's a symbol in Zen called the Enzo, which is it's like, you can see it sometimes, it's like a brushstroke of a circle. And
yes.
And the teaching around that, the teaching of continuation, the teaching of, in the present moment, we heal our past and we create our future. it all happens right now, what we do right now. A lot of us are afraid. A lot of people are afraid of their past, and they're afraid of like going back and getting stuck in the past. And that's not what self-compassion is about. It's about healing your past in the present moment so that you create a new future for yourself. It all happens right here and right now. Your actions today, you watching this IG live with Giulia and my experience with you, Giulia, will change the course of my day. It's going to change how I see things, how I see people, how I act towards myself, how I act towards other people. And when I do that, it's changing my future, and it's changing all the people that I'm interacting with. So we heal the past, we change our future in the present. And with compassion, that is the skill. Like that gives us the capacity to do that. So it's so good to be here with you. I haven't told that story, Julie. It's the first time I've told that story. Yeah, and it's because it's you, because I feel so, you create such an environment of love and understanding and realness to you. And I'm just so grateful to have you as my friend.
God, and you know that the war ground that you had to come out of to get to this place. Let me tell you, I understand it now, because when I have it right with me, I have it right with you. And if there's something wrong between me and myself, then there's going to be something wrong between me and everyone in my life, because I'm going to lead with my projections. I'm going to lead with all of my emotional immaturity and all of my misfires that trauma has given me, because now I don't always see the world the way that it actually is. And when I don't have the relationship with myself in the right space, I'm definitely not going to be able to have the relationship with you in the right space. And I so appreciate hearing what you have to say about me. And not because I love to hear about myself, but because I'm like, wow, she says I'm organized. Like, I remember one time Diana says to me, guys, Julia, you must really value organization. You have such organization. I'm like, me? And then I look around, I'm like, well, I guess I have 7 calendars in this house. I'm very, I'm never on time, but I have 7 calendars. And I really appreciate that, because that wouldn't be something that I would use to describe myself. And so you need people who have the courage to be able to see in you what you don't see in yourself and to tell you about it. So I really appreciate that there's nothing but love here. There's, nothing but love here since I've met you. And you help me to live by the values that I say that I have. And you help me to live by the standards that I tell everybody that you should have. Because if I'm not embodying what it is that I'm teaching, then it's useless.
Yeah.
And you're going to all feel it too. That's why you land on this page the way that you land on this page with this content, because you feel the genuineness behind it, which is why I love Dr. Diana so much, which is why I'm telling you, get the book. I have her books. I'm surrounded by her card. I'm surrounded by Dr. Diana's energy all day long, because it just makes sense because of who she is and the way that she does what she does. Sure, can I go find somebody else who's teaching ACT? You're right, I can. But nobody does it quite the way that she does it.
Thank you, Julia. You're so fantastic. Yeah. And if you haven't listened to our interview, one of my favorite interviews of the year, Giulia tells her story about her mom. And it is so engaging. You'll want to listen to it more than once, which I did. And it's the one episode that I have sent to more clients than any other episode, because so many people relate to struggling with their family member. And you are a living example of how to develop self-compassion and then use that compassion with a family member. So it's on, my podcast is in a changing right now to the Wise Effort podcast. But if you look up Your Life in Process, or just look up Giulia's name and my name, it'll come up pretty quickly. And it is a beautiful, beautiful story where you embody the principles in how you navigated that estrangement and what you're doing now. So I know people want to hear the story. So go listen.
Because I value family, and you taught me how to redefine what I valued in life, and giving me permission to value again, because life and trauma makes you feel devalued as a human being. And because of the decisions that you made, because of the shame that you're still carrying and not willing to put down and to explore, you don't feel like you're allowed to have values. Because of who I used to be, I didn't feel like I could have values, that I could speak about standards, that I could tell you, no, this is actually, you get a second chance. As often as you need it with yourself. And you do get to have the things that you didn't always embody. And that's why I speak with the compassion and with the conviction that I have, is because I didn't always have the self-compassion, and because my relationships were trash, and because I was participating in the reason why they weren't working. It was my fault too. And that is the part that when I finally saw myself as somebody worth taking care of, I can own my part and I can become accountable and I can show remorse, because I want to receive it. I want to be somebody who receives an apology when somebody else wrongs her. I want to be able to lead with that my bad. I don't want to ever feel like I've got it all figured out, because I don't. And that humility is what you're going to feel coming through from us too, is because look, we know that we don't have it all figured out. We're doing the very best we can, and we want to help as many people on this path as we can, because that's truly what we are, is good, kind helpers.
Yeah.
That's it. Just good, kind helpers.
And the research supports everything that you're saying. So just to say that there's been numerous researchers that have shown that when you practice self-compassion, you're actually more likely to make amends. You're more motivated to make positive changes. You're more motivated to improve your behavior. And so it becomes this positive cycle instead of a vicious cycle. And we started out today talking about being stuck in the misery of self criticism and self-hatred, and why do we make this a habit? It can feel addictive. You can form a new habit, a different spiral, one that is impactful to you, but also ends up changing your behavior in positive ways. And that's what you've done with your life. That's what you continue to do with this work. And that I think that all of us could use that as a model of what we can do in the world. Again, we need our wisest versions of us. Every single person listening, we need you to be the wisest version of you in order for us to solve the problems of this planet. No one person can do it. We have to do it together. And it starts with compassion for yourself, compassion for each other, compassion for the trees, compassion for the birds, compassion for our oceans as well. Yeah.
And then so before we end today, I just saw somebody, Big City Apple. It makes me think about, growing up in the inner city where we didn't have access to a lot of living things and trees. Like, listen to what Diana is saying about going outside into nature. And maybe those of you who are in the city, go to Central Park today and go put your hand on a tree, and put your hand on the tree and put your hand on yourself, and feel that connection, because you have a connection to all living things. And one of the greatest things that's really the biggest threat to humans today is loneliness. And the connection to yourself will lead you to the connection with everybody else. I promise you, all of the relationships you have will be richer and more meaningful when you apply the self-compassion work. I know you're in relationships now, some of you, and I know that you're struggling in them too. And some of you know that the relationship that you have with yourself is the reason why you're struggling. So let's lean in here. Everything that has happened has already happened to you. You already got through it. Your history is part of your destiny. Diana and I have taught you that over and over again as to why that's true. And it starts with you. When you have it good with yourself, you're going to go out there with eyes of love. And that's what this world needs. It's just more love, more kindness. Go sprinkle that shit everywhere. And remember that people that are not kind to you inside, it's a war zone. Don't take anything personally. It's not about you. But when you make it about you, that shows me you got some work to do. And the self-compassion daily journal is going to be the work that you need to do so that you don't make it about yourself anymore. We can't get rid of this without doing this. And then you'll be empty of yourself, and it'll just be what you have to offer everybody else, which is love and kindness. That's where I'm ending today.
Thank you, Giulia.
Love you so much. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for having this space and welcoming Dr. Diana. And I always love having you here. Anytime you want to chat, you know where to find me. Thanks for being a good friend. Thank you for embodying friendship the way that I have always imagined it. And for those of you who don't have friendships like this, I just met her in 2021. Okay, I just met her. This version of me was able to attract Dr. Diana because of the work that I've done. So continue working on yourself if you want to have better quality people in your lives.
Thank you, Giulia.
You're welcome.
You're a blessing in my life. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Be good to yourselves and each other.